Hi there, welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. In this podcast, I interview successful business leaders and industry experts to help you grow your business. In this episode, my guest is Steffan Surdek. Stefan is the founder and a principal at Surdek Solutions Inc. He's the author of several eBooks and publications. His recent book is The Way of the Co-Creative Leader, transforming your mindset and your leadership style to increase your impact as a leader everywhere in your life. His focus is on continuous learning. He has been training business leaders to provide mentorship, coaching, various employees training to build effective workplace and culture. We had a very interesting discussion around the co-creative leadership style. As a business leaders or business executives, if you ever been stuck in a situation and you felt that you need a sounding board, or you need a different perspective, or you need somebody in your immediate network for support, you will find this discussion very interesting. Stefan has a very practical and logical approach to many complex leadership challenges. We also had a discussion on how to master a difficult conversation. There is actually a video series on Stefan's website. I'm going to include a link below this video for you to go check it out. If you find a value in this discussion, don't forget to give me a thumbs up, send me feedback. Until next time, please welcome my guest, Steffan Surdek. Hi guys, welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. Today my guest is Steffan Surdek. Stefan, welcome to our podcast. Thank you so much for time today.
Thank you very much for having me, Gurmeet. I'm very thrilled and honored to have this conversation with you today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to learning about leadership. You've been helping leaders for a very long time. So if you just highlight, what are some of the challenges you see that, people are struggling with at the moment, and we're just coming out from COVID. So what do you see some of those, challenges and some of the opportunities for leaders these days?
So some of the big challenges I typically see for leaders is leaders tend to, unfortunately, take a little bit too much work on their own, and they pick up a lot of the weight. So sometimes, instead of leveraging their management team, leveraging the people around them, they feel they need to take a little bit more on, or a lot more on. And they do that all from the place of, I want to help. My team is already overloaded. I don't want to overload them more. But at the same time, they're kind of hurting themselves and overloading themselves more and more and more. So I find one of the big challenges for leaders is, how can you really make yourself vulnerable, open up with your team, and share when you need help? And have things be the team's problem, not just your problem.
Yeah, that's probably difficult to do because, you want to help people around you. And, it's coming from probably place that, listen, somebody's getting behind, I want to help out. But I guess you also keep in with the opportunity for people to fail and learn from experience as well, instead of if you just keep stepping in and helping people.
Well, yeah, when you're always stepping in and doing things for people, what happens is you're not building any resilience on your team. You're not building the capacity of your team. And then what will happen is your team you feel as if your team is stagnating, and you're frustrated as a leader. You're going, why isn't my team getting this? But part of the answer to that is, what is your leadership creating? And by doing these things, you're creating a space where the team just depends on you to keep doing things for them by default. So how do you expose people more? But when you do that, you need to accept that it may not be exactly the way you do things. So that's another challenge for leaders in business.
Yeah, it's just not done your way, but that doesn't mean it's a wrong way of doing it or it's done wrong. It's just not, done your way. You have to be open to say, listen, it doesn't have to be my way as long as the work is done, or somebody may have a better idea than you.
Yeah, but you have to be open to that. And also, sometimes you may need, depending on what it is that you're asking people, you need to be willing to teach. As a leader, you need to be willing to sit with the people on your team, show them what to do a little bit, or balance, find a way to find the right balance. And not, sometimes we mistake delegation for, here, I'm going to give you this for you to do, Gurmeet, do this for me. And then that's when the expectation comes in. But if you say, here, could you do this for me? Here are some examples of what I've done in the past. I expect something more or less like this, but you can tweak it if you have better ideas. Already you're in a better place.
I see. So not doing it for them, but at least set some expectation that this is what the expectations are. That's what we are expecting to do. So Did that, but that's been there even before COVID. Did that change a little bit during the COVID, or expectation change a little bit, or is it's always been the same way?
I think what happened during COVID is people got more busy. I know a lot of the leaders I work with, sometimes it's hard for us to find time. We have regular time planned in my schedule, but it's hard for us to take that time because there's always an emergency.
Hmm.
And I found that that's the one thing since that's one of the big things since COVID. Leaders seem a lot more overwhelmed than they were, and leaders were already busy before. But I think part of that is because what COVID did is it kind of erased the boundaries a little bit more between work and your personal life. So now
Yeah.
because you're teleworking, it's as if we can have these higher expectations of people, or just people say, well, I'm not traveling, so I have a bit more time to put. But having clear boundaries and saying, okay, I work from 9 to 6, 6 o'clock, I spend time with my family for a few hours, or I find ways to not have to work at night. But I know a lot of leaders that they used to work late before, and now with COVID, there's more time at home. So it's more time to work overtime at home.
Yeah, that's very difficult to draw boundaries because you're working on your hours, but you need to be careful with the health as well, right? So only
Yes.
only thing compensate out of the whole thing is your health, or your family time, right? And when you're not spending the family time and you're not taking care of your health, even the quality of the work's going to suffer.
Yes. Ironically enough, I work with some leaders that tell me that the solution for them is going back to work. Because
In
when they go
office.
back to the office, what happens is there's a boundary. They get in their car in the morning, they get out when they're at the office, they get back in their car at the end of the day, and they get in at home, and it creates a break. It creates a bit more of a routine where they can say, this is where work starts, this is where work ends.
Hmm. But you could create those boundaries without going to office as well, right? So you don't have to go to office if you
You don't have
discipline it.
to.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
could
you
create
need
those
the
boundaries at
discipline.
home as well. Yeah.
The way I used to do it in the past, I worked from home for 2.5 years, and I always tried to, before COVID, a long time ago, and I don't want to betray my age, but it's been a
It,
while. And when I used to do it, my kids were young. So for me, the excuse was 4:30, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm working from home, but I need to go pick up my kids at daycare.
wow. Yeah, you gotta make those sacrifices, right? So.
And sometimes it's not necessarily a sacrifice, it's just a reason to stop. It's an excuse to stop and to
Mhm.
have some time for yourself. And in those days, what I would typically do is I knew between 4:30 and 8 o'clock, that was family time. And then the
Got
kids
you.
were in bed, and if I needed to do anything else, I did something else. But during that time, I never worked.
I see. Yeah, so you gotta set those boundaries, and I think one of the area most leaders, people are listening or watching, definitely leaders. We also have to do creative work, and I always find a very quiet time when I'm going to do a creative work, when I'm going to do a reputational work or transactional work, right? So you need to be very careful of how you schedule your creative work because that work is more important than you usually than transactional stuff or reputational stuff.
You're absolutely right. And like more often than not, one of the challenges leaders face too is that their day is filled with meetings at the
Mhm.
office. So, their time to do the creative work is after hours, which is kind of wrong. Sometimes, even in your day, book yourself some time, which is kind of your reserved time to be creative, and no one can book meetings there. Even if it's like, a couple of half days a week in your week, it'll
Yeah.
already start creating you space in the longer term.
Yeah, I find that only way I can get a handle on that, Stefan, is my creative work is from a 5 to 7 in the morning. Those 2 hours, I
Yeah.
put more work in, and that's very quiet time. I'm not being disturbed, so I can focus a lot more, and then during the day. So by the time everybody comes to office, I'm all ready for the day. But everybody needs to find a different time, whatever time works for them, I guess, right?
I completely agree with you. My spouse, she works from home, and her quiet time, the way that you described, is between maybe 6:30 and 8:30.
Yeah,
And there's only one of her colleagues that pings her during that time because he's the early bird too.
yeah.
So, it's kind of their time to connect sometimes, and to see if they need help from one another, they need quality time, that's the time they use.
Especially for last couple of years, a little bit slowed down in the businesses. Did that give leaders a little pause to focus a little bit more on themselves and become more creative, Stefan? Or you think that it just made it worse because it got more work piled up on the plates?
I'll tell you, I don't think, unfortunately, and I work in personal development world, so it's kind of that's the clientele I work with. A lot of the leaders struggle to find the time, and they really have to make a commitment. And once they commit and they find the right ways to commit, they can do it. But it's a challenge because there's always this perception when you're a leader that everything else is more important than you. And you'll invest in growing your team, you'll invest in making things happen in the company, but it's funny, you will forget ourselves as leaders.
Yeah.
We won't. And there's two things, by the way, just you
Okay, no worries. Yeah, go.
There's the idea of personal development, and there's also the idea of self-care
Right.
for leaders.
So how's that different, personal care than self-care?
Well, personal development is about taking time maybe for some coaching, taking time to listen to some podcasts, taking time to get new information in your head.
Okay.
But self-care is more about what are you doing for yourself to kind of create a bubble for yourself. I'll do meditation on a regular basis, for example. Or when do you find time to go get a massage somewhere? When do you find time to have a nap in the middle of the day? All these things are about taking care of yourself and helping yourself be more resilient as a leader.
Yeah, I think the meditation I find is a great tool. It kind of grounds you to yourself and connect you with yourself, and it kind of calms down everything. I find that works beautiful for me as well. I think that those are the, you got to find what works for you, but for me, that is a tool that brings everything to the calm.
I have a very simple exercise that I do with leaders to help them ground themselves. It's so short, I'm going to take a chance and we're going to try to do it right here, just to walk people through it. So basically, it's just about sitting down and just closing your eyes, letting like all the weight of the world, like just slow down your body. And then take a deep breath in and a very deep breath out. And let's do that 2 more times. Just taking this time. Just 2 minutes, not even. It can help you get yourself in a different headspace.
Yeah. I think especially when you have a lot of decisions to make, you're trying to make a decision, you want to make sure that you're making the right decision. Just doing this exercise, which you just mentioned, it may introduce different perspective when you're making very tough decisions.
Yes, or just if you're in your day and you're going from meeting to meeting and you're stressed out, taking the time to just pause and do this exercise, it won't even take 2 minutes. And you can do that before going into another meeting, before hopping onto Zoom or hopping onto WebEx or Teams or whatever it is you use.
Yeah, I was watching a stats on a mental health issues. I'm not sure if you follow the stats in Canada. I think they were saying that from every 5 people, either they are dealing with the mental health challenges or they know somebody in a family who's dealing with it. So if those numbers are so high, if the leaders are dealing with it or they have family members that are dealing with it, definitely focus on yourself, and slowing it down a little bit will help to deal with those mental health challenges or all those issues they're dealing with.
Yeah. You make me think as we're chatting here, the way that you brought that up. The other thing that we talk about sometimes is resilience, being resilient as a leader. And I find that, yes, it's important to be resilient as a leader. It's important to bounce back. It's important to be there for your people. It's important to, help your team and work with your team to find solutions for things. But one thing that people forget when it comes to resilience is there's a cost eventually to being resilient if you do not do self-care, if you do not take care of yourself. There's a big cost to that as a
Wow.
leader on yourself.
Yeah, over the time, especially if you're doing it for a longer time and you're not taking any breaks. Very interesting. So one side, leaders have to take care of themselves, whether it's a mental health or physical health, and taking care, it's a self-care, but they also have to teach their teams the same to take care of themselves as well, Stefan. That's where the
Yeah,
coaching comes
I
in, I
agree.
guess, right? So
I
so
agree.
how does that work? Definitely, I need to take care of myself. Then also I need to teach my teams they can take care of themselves as well.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things that I tell leaders for that type of thing is start with you and tell your team about what you do. Share what you do. Share your experiences around what you do. Because if you start telling your team, oh yeah, it's important, self-care is important, you have to do these things, and you never do them, and they know you never do them, they're going to pull out their bullshit card on you. And they're going to say, no, you can say that all you want, Gurmeet, but you
Yeah.
don't do it yourself. So it's kind of, what can you do to show them the way, to show them the example? In my company, I had a rough time a few years ago. And what I would do sometimes when I didn't have calls in the afternoon, I would take the afternoon off, or I would take a few hours. I'd take an hour in the afternoon and I would go have a nap. But I would call, before I did that, I would call my admin, my colleague, and I would tell her, look, I'm not feeling up to this right now. I need some time for myself. I'm going to go have a nap. I'll be back in an hour. And you know what? It made it okay for her when she wasn't feeling well to tell me that she wasn't necessarily feeling great today, or that she needed a bit of time, and when she needed a bit of time, it wasn't I need the whole day. It was I need a few hours for myself, just to finish. Yeah, sure, go. You need to value it yourself.
Yeah. And then you perform much better afterwards, right? Even you have to go back to after a couple hours, your productivity goes up, your creativity goes up because you just rested a little bit and you can produce a lot more work afterwards.
Exactly. And the thing is, you have to give yourself some grace to be able to do that. As a leader, you have to not be too hard on yourself. No, Gurmeet, that little voice in your head, I'm sure you know that voice that goes, Gurmeet, you can't do that. You have all this work to do. Why take a nap? You can't afford to take a nap. You have all this work. And if you take a nap, it's not going to get done. But sometimes answering that little voice and saying, yeah, I know, but I'll be much more productive if I take this nap. So thank you for your opinion, but I'm still going to go take a nap.
Yeah, you just go ahead with it. Very interesting. So leaders definitely have a challenges, Stefan. Self-care is one. Definitely we got to build culture, train our teams. Same time, a lot of leaders I know they're up against is a business challenges. That we definitely have, a lot of companies have to reinvent their products or reinvent their services, whatever they were doing, because what worked before COVID, it's not working for a lot of companies. They have to reinvent to scale back the companies were the way to generate those revenues again. How do they find a balance? I think that's a challenge we've been talking about. Yeah, you want to take care of yourself, but at the same time, there's also challenges that they have to move the companies forward.
Yeah. So here's the thing. The first thing is I find is to not be just reactive to what's going on. Because if you're just reactive to what's going on, there's a difference between being an intentional leader, having a vision, working towards a vision, and trying to reach that vision versus, no, we have this release to do. Let's go, all hands on deck. But there's no vision on it. We're just running from one emergency to the next. If you know what you're trying to do with your company, what you're trying to do with your products, you can have a much better conversation with your people to keep focus, to have a vision, to keep focus. The challenge leaders have right now is that they don't have time for that. They don't create time for that. And the leaders that do not create time for that are the ones that are struggling the most.
Wow. Yeah, that if you just keep going at it and you're not stepping back and you're not creating a time, how are you gonna go back and focus? How about a collaboration with the leaders as well? Sometimes you may not have a time, but can you collaborate with somebody that will save you a lot of time? Because if you collaborate with other leaders, they may have a different strategies or different ways of looking at things and have a different perspective than you do, and you probably get there much faster.
So tell me more. Are you talking about collaborating with leaders in other companies, or are you
Other companies, yeah. So
talking
if
about
I'm
inside?
no, even across the companies, if I have somebody trying to build a business, less a manufacturing companies, the other manufacturing company done that, can they collaborate? Those collaborations, they may have already solved the problem what you're trying to solve, and they learn from each other instead of trying to figure things out by yourself.
Some industries do that. It depends how much people, it depends on a few things. It kind of probably depends on, are we competitors?
I
And if
see.
we're competitors, are we competitors in the same city? Because if we're not competitors in the same city, maybe we can just afford to help each other and it doesn't really impact
Hmm.
either of our businesses. Are we complementary? What do you bring that I do not have? That's
Yeah.
another key thing around collaboration. And how does this, the biggest thing is, how can this collaboration work for both of us? Not just something that works for me, but that works for you too, so that you have a reason to play along. Because when you
Interesting.
collaborate like that, it's not always about um, paying someone else to help do the work, right? Sometimes it's about helping each other to achieve results, and the win is this time that we spend together.
I see. Yeah, because a lot of people, a lot of business leaders I know, we all come from technical, backgrounds. If somebody's very good engineers, they run an engineering company, so they definitely, get on a position. But we never get those training to be effective leader because we came from technical backgrounds. So
Yeah.
so you always have some blind spot. You always need a new perspective. And when you collaborate or work with somebody like yourself, definitely you can highlight a lot more blind spot that I'm going to be able to look into, right? So that I think that's, you need those kind of mentors, those kind of coaching to get to where you need to get to, so you can cover all that blind spot and deal with it.
So we're talking about something a little bit different now. Now, what I'm hearing that we're talking about is either peer groups,
Yeah, or
peer
mentors.
development groups,
Yeah, or
or
mentors or coaches.
mentors.
Yeah.
Yes, just mentors even is already a good step forward, because there is a difference between a mentor and a coach. A
Okay.
mentor is someone that has walked the path before and that can help you walk the path that you're trying to walk on, versus a mentor can spend more time in reflection, less time in sharing experience.
Mm-hmm. Wow, interesting.
And for leaders, you're right about people in the tech background. That's a big problem um, in business right now. Because what happens, I'll repeat what you said with maybe a slightly different flavor. You
Yeah.
were saying these tech people come from a technical world. They've done development all their life. They've done coding. They've done architecture, project management, whatever. And then because there was nowhere else to put them in the company, but they're very valuable to the company, eventually the only place to put them is a management role.
Yeah.
And then when we put them in a management role, they don't have the support to understand the soft side of leadership. They're very much in their technical personas, so to speak, where
Mm-hmm.
sometimes there's a little bit less emotion, there's a little bit less soft skills, there's a little bit less taking care of people. The part that you didn't mention that I see often is sometimes it's a chain though. So you promote a technical person to manager, but the person above them had the exact same experience and did not necessarily get the help to get the soft skills, right? And then it goes up the ladder. So sometimes you'll have the vice president, you'll have a director, you'll have a manager, but they're all cut from the same technical cloth. And they all lack that same thing because we don't teach the soft skills in school.
So what happens in that kind of environment? So they all on the same level. So how do you change that the ladder, and how do you fix that?
So there's a couple of different permutations of this that are
Okay.
interesting. Let's talk about the first one. If there's a chain, then working with the coach to help all the elements of the chain move along and kind of move along in parallel. And it's a group thing. We're trying to do this, and it's going to take us a couple of years to do this. And we know this and we accept this. That's one way. One thing that becomes challenging is if you're in the middle if you're like at the general manager level or something like that, your vice president came from the technical background. There was a lot of history, a lot of very techie still, very hands-on, never learned elements of collaborative leadership, right? But you're in the middle and you're trying to show this person, then you're going to have a difficult time. It's going to be challenging for you because sometimes you're going to be talking to your boss in a way that your boss is kind of not going to understand you.
Mm-hmm.
So
Interesting.
as a leader in that situation, it's about how do you change your approach so that you can support and coach, gently coach your leader without actually being your leader's official coach, because that's not always your role, and that's not always what your boss would expect from you.
Mm-hmm.
So how can you change your way of leading and interacting with your leader to gently bring that person along and help them grow as well and see new possibilities?
Yeah, I can see the conflict between those just communication or just how you engage it. But how about the leadership development courses, or development training? Would that apply to all three of them? If they all go to same leadership development training, would that be one way of dealing with it, that they can all learn and grow?
That would be one way. One way that I find more effective is not just training courses, but doing something that is hands-on with the way that you're doing things. So not to promote something I'm doing, but I'll just explain how I run one of my programs to give you an idea of this. I run a program for management teams to help them better collaborate together. And the way that I start is I work with them over 6 half-day sessions, and it's every 2 weeks. So first of all, they need to commit that every 2 weeks, they're going to be available as a management team to do this. And we do not move as much as we can. We do not move the sessions, right? Because I do this because I want them in a bubble. In between sessions, I'll spend time with them in some of their management meetings, and then in action, as we see things happen in the meeting, we go, you remember what we talked about last week? This is it now.
I see.
Okay. So you remember what we talked about last week? How can we apply this now?
Okay.
So at least people can relate it to their real life situations. Sometimes the challenge with coaching or just with training, I'll go with training, not coaching. With training is that we go to this 2-day course, or we go to this 3, 4, 5-day course, whatever, and we expect that magically it's going to change. But unless we have practice in the moment, and that we can get called out, we can get supported, we can get help, then we need to be willing to hear that. We need to be willing to do something with that and act on it. That's the accelerator. That's the secret sauce.
Yeah, if I go to training, I learn something or gather information, but how I'm gonna relate that to the real life situations when I'm dealing with it. So that connection between those two, I think that's very helpful, because not only I have information, now I have a situation in front of me, and I can connect those dots and apply that what I learned from training.
Yeah, and one of the things I like to do, I call it the timeout method when I'm coaching. So sometimes I'll be in a management meeting, and then all of a sudden I see it fall off the rails. My gift is I can see the moment it fell off the rails in the conversation. I can see it. And I can almost say, okay, this may go bad now. And when it starts sliding, I'll call timeout. And the people I work with give me full permission to do this. And then I go, okay, are we off the track now, or are we good? Oh, we're off the track. Okay, how did we get off the track? And then we rewind and we talk about those moments, and we say, okay, if we go back and restart there, how can we start this differently now? And we start over.
Yeah, it's like playing a football or any sport, right? You play sport, and then you watch the video, and then you correct yourself, and then next time when you go back, then you correct that whether it's a form or whether the way you run a play, you go back and fix that play, right?
Yeah, and for that it takes humility. Like, as a leader, what I teach leaders sometimes to do is if they did something in a meeting that created something bad, I actually invite them to take ownership of it and to say, okay, Gurmeet, look, when I said this, I understand that I set you off. I'm sorry. Can we start this conversation again, please?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it sounds like a very weird thing to do. How can I restart? But wait a sec, the person just took ownership. The person just apologized to me. The person just realized what they did to me. Yeah, sure. Let's try again.
Yeah. And when you try again the second time, you're aware of that, and then you're definitely gonna change the behavior or whatever the correction you gotta make, right? Second time.
Yes. So often what I ask people is when you come into a difficult or a challenging conversation, be clear on your intention.
Yeah.
So what conversation am I trying to have with Gurmeet right now? I'm trying to have this conversation. So now if I find myself that the conversation derails and we're talking about something else, I should be able to say, Gurmeet, look, I'm sorry. This isn't the conversation I want to have. This is the one. Can we come back to this one, please?
Yeah. And I think that open dialogue, Stefan, it builds a trust as well with the people. People can trust you that if I do ever go off the trail, somebody gonna bring me back, or like vice versa, or if the other person goes, then you're gonna have that also the same the feeling that, hey, listen, I'm comfortable, I can bring him back as well if he goes off the trail.
Yeah, because with what you're saying there about going off the trail and being able to say it, there's something in companies, sometimes the dynamics between people, we don't always feel that we have permission to say certain things, to do certain things. Who am I to say this to my boss, right?
Yeah.
Who am I to say this to my team? And when we do that, we take all our personal power away and we kind of put it in a box and say, we're not going to do anything with this right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Versus if we have clarity on what we're trying to do together, yes, so now we're working on communicating better as a team. For a very basic example. So now, for example, if I go off the rails, you're welcome to come and tell me, Stefan, we talked about better communication this year, right? How is this helping us communicate better? Now, one of two things are going to happen. Either I'm going to get madder and I'm going to lose, or I'm going to step down and I'm going to say, you're right. So often I talk about creating anchor points, things that we can come back to, that we can say, this is something we said we wanted to do together. So wait a sec, is this consistent with what we said we wanted to do? No? Okay, so what are we going to do about it?
Interesting.
So by having clear commitments between each other as to what we're trying to do, and you can do this as a group, you can do this with an employee in a one-on-one, growing someone during the year, same principle applies.
So how do you create those anchor points, Stefan? Are the anchor points as simply to keep that discussion on a target, or those anchor points have to tie back to the long-term goals that what we're trying to achieve as a team? That conversation can go anywhere. I'm going to bring you back to that what are we trying to achieve as a team. Leave that conversation.
So I want to tell you it's all of the above.
Okay.
And let me give you some examples. So you can have an anchor point, which is as simple as for coaching an employee, for coaching one of your employees during the year. Can we agree that this year we're working together on how to improve your communication?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So do you agree that I can give you feedback as I feel necessary, that we can have conversations about this during the year? Yes. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So now I know we just agreed to it. So now when we talk during the year in our one-on-ones, when I see something in a meeting and I want to talk to you about it after, I can always come back to our agreement. You remember, Gurmeet, we were talking about improving your communication. I noticed that in this meeting, when you said this, maybe you could have said it differently.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed when I read this email you sent, maybe you could have said it like this instead. But now it's an agreement. So I said I wanted to.
Yeah.
The next level is on the team level. So on the team level, sometimes as a team, you'll create, what I do in some workshops is I'll create what I call a working agreement with the team. What are the behaviors that we expect from one another? No cell phones in meetings. Respectful communication, raising our hands before speaking. I'm giving you very basic ones.
Yeah. But
Okay?
some sort of structure,
Yes.
in the meetings. Okay.
Yeah, that we agreed upon, that this is what we want. So now when we see things like that that are not happening, it's about anyone being able to say, this is what we said, right? Why isn't this happening? It's not because Gurmeet is the boss that Gurmeet should be bringing it up all the time. We need to take ownership of this as a team. It's the permission slip for the team to talk about these things. So you can look at it in terms of, rules of engagement that people call. I prefer to call them working agreements. Another way is sometimes I create an agreement with teams around how do we want to handle conflict together? What are our expectations together when we are in a conflictual conversation?
Interesting. That's a big one, actually.
Yes. So I expect what's acceptable is listening, no screaming. You can be angry, you can be passionate, but just no screaming without any listening, but it's not not being emotional at all. What's unacceptable? Well, unacceptable is being disrespectful to people during that conflict or things like that. Then you can come back and you can say, wait a sec, let me pull out the conflict sheet now. This is what we said, right? Are we behaving this way? And then it's about practicing.
So you document all those acceptable, what's not acceptable. You document it and use that as your charters or
as your support.
As support.
Yes. So with some teams back in the days before COVID, I had a team where we actually made a poster with the working agreement. And every time there was a management team meeting, we knew these rules applied. And we unrolled it and we stuck it on the wall. And then people practice calling each other.
You need that, even but I'm talking to a team sometime, I tend to go longer on a point that I should have. And I feel bad that how come nobody stopped me? I kept going on a point. They understood the first couple of times I mentioned that. Why do I have to mention 3 times or 4 times? I wish somebody had stopped me. Okay, we got the point. Let's move on to the next one.
Yes. But then for that, it's about training our team as to how is it acceptable to say that?
Yeah.
And that's something I did with one manager with who I worked a few years ago. This manager always felt that he was talking too much in meetings. So what we kind of agreed upon is we agreed to do an experiment with his team where we would give his team full permission to call him out during the week when they felt he was talking too much in certain key meetings. So we do the first week. After the first week, we come back on the experiment and we ask the team, how many times did anyone call out the boss?
Yeah.
And no hands came up. So I said, okay,
understand.
That's cool. We tried it. So now why? And then people were saying, well, I'm not comfortable because I wouldn't know how. So we found a very easy way of how, which was just raise your hand and just gently interrupt the boss.
Don't say anything.
Yeah, just gently raise your hand and say, ahem,
Oops.
to attract attention. And it was simple, right? But once we started teaching, it was also about seeing, okay, now, Mr. Boss Person, how are you comfortable being interrupted? What is it that you want? What can I say that will not upset you?
Yeah.
And then it became clear that, okay, it was this or it was that, and people could. So it's about practicing. It's about having fun with it.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, once you set up those boundaries, you set up the system in place, then it's easy to follow. But once everybody's agreed upon, it's you just following the system. Very interesting.
One of my funniest stories with the clients that makes me laugh the most every time I think about it.
Okay.
One of the leaders I worked with told me, Stefan, we're getting too comfortable with you. Said sometimes when you're in meetings and you're helping us with things, you're too hands-on. And I'd like it if you could try when you come into a meeting with us to ask us what we would like from you that day or that meeting, and that you just ask accordingly. So if we want you to be hands-on, you can be hands-on. If we want you to be hands-off, be hands-off.
Yeah.
I said, okay. So one day, next day after this person tells me that we're in the meeting, and that's the first thing I do, because it was something about rewriting some stuff, and there was a group that was in French, that spoke French. They were very comfortable when I would beautify things in English. So they, at the start of the meeting, I asked them and I said, okay, before we start, I need to try something today. They said, okay. So I haven't done this with you yet, but I have the feeling sometimes I'm too hands-on with you. So I'd like to ask you today, what would you expect from me in this meeting? Would you expect me to be hands-on, and even if I end up rewriting part of the stuff that's there and making it easy for you? Or would you expect me to just sit here, listen, and when you have questions, you ask me and I will intervene?
Yeah.
And they all had like the little smile of, oh my God, you actually said that you do this stuff for us. And okay, no, we want you to listen, Steph.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, I'm good. So at first I listen, but then they're not going fast enough. And then it's not happening the way that I'd like it to happen. And now I'm getting impatient. And now I'm starting to drive them. And I'm starting to push them. And then I see myself do this with them. And I'm thinking, my God, you're being so bad.
Yeah.
No one's saying anything. So at one point I stopped and I laughed. In the middle of doing it, I stopped and I laughed. And I said, people, I'm being horrible.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I'm going to be here and listen. And right now I'm driving you and I'm pushing you because you're not going fast enough for me. My God. And no one is telling me. I'm being a monster. Give me some Valium. Give me some help.
Yeah.
And they all started laughing. And it took the edge off because they all knew what I was doing, but no one would tell me because they were being respectful of me.
Yeah.
Right? So I acted up again a little bit later. And someone looked at me, started laughing, and went, you need a Valium now, Steph? Is that time now? But I gave them the language.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So when they told me, I said, good for you.
Yeah. Yeah. You set it up. Beautiful. Beautiful. Good. So let's talk about your journey, Steph. How you get so good at this leadership? What inspired you? What, how you got interested in building leaders, helping leaders, and doing this line of work?
So ironically enough, we were talking about the tech people earlier and the journey of the tech people.
Yeah.
I was a tech person for 17 years.
Wow. What you were doing?
I was doing software development. I did pretty much everything you could do in software development, from testing to developing to managing teams to architecture. I used to do all of that.
Okay.
And I got tired of the proverbial technological wheel. This thing where you need to learn the next library, the next programming language, and there was a lot of change back in my day. Sorry, that dates me a bit. But
that sounds like a J2E development.
Yeah, no, exactly. It was back in those
I was J2E developer as well. That's what I did many years for J2E development. Okay.
I used to do Delphi development as well.
Okay, interesting.
I did some Java, I did some Delphi, I did not as much C++, but
okay.
But anyways, I was in that era, and I got tired of the technological wheel, and I didn't want to do tech that way anymore. So in my teams, I started becoming the big brother, and it was kind of almost a natural switch. I was working with tech people that had trouble speaking together. I was working on remote teams, on distributed teams. So I worked with teams, and when working from Montreal, I worked with teams in different areas of the US. We were like near shore. So one of the teams, they were horrible with us because they felt, They felt that they were losing their jobs to us, which they weren't necessarily, but was what it was at the time.
Yeah.
And so back in those days, I slowly started becoming the person that could bridge the gap between teams, and that could help change behaviors between teams, that could help people communicate, collaborate better. And then from there, I fell into the agile coaching space.
Got you.
And eventually I went on my own personal development journey where I realized in my 40s, in my early 40s, oh, now I really dated myself. I realized in my early 40s that I was disconnected from my emotions, and my emotions were starting to come back up. And I went for a coaching course for a year, which completely changed my life and kind of reconnected me to myself. And ever since then, I've become kind of the tech guru whisperer type of thing, where I understand the how tech people tick, how they work, how they think, and I bring the human side back to them.
Yeah, that's much needed, because most software developers, we are logical people, analytical and logical people. We're very good at that area because it's a hard job, especially software development. You're coding all day, you're looking at the screen and just punching in numbers, and logical, analytical. But looking at other side of this, emotional side and soft side of skill side of thing, that's a totally different world for us, right? So it's you bridge the gap very well, but but a lot of people, we can't get there. It's very difficult to do.
Exactly. And the way that I help the people bridge the gap is I take people where they're at. I don't judge. So for me, the prerequisite is that you want to learn, you want to grow, you want to try stuff, and you're not afraid to be vulnerable in front of your team, and you're willing to do the work. And if you're willing to do the work, we'll find the path together, and we'll create that path. And I never expect people to be perfect. I expect people to be as imperfect as they can be, and we work from there, because that's who we are. No one is perfect.
Yeah. No, those definitely, that's a huge help to people. I wish I met somebody who could help me when I started a business, because when you go in a business, technical skills, it's good that you have technical skills, but those skills not going to take you where you want to get to. When you're building a companies, it's your other side where your sales skills, your soft skills, your leadership skills. Those are the skills you need to build in order to get to the next step.
Yes, and sometimes the challenge is, as a technical leader, you don't always have the right mentors and the right guidance to help you grow. I was fortunate. I had a couple of great leaders that I worked with that showed me something else that was possible, or that opened my eyes to other possibilities. And I've been doing organizational coaching for 12, 13 years now at different levels. I've worked mostly with teams when I started, but now I work more with management teams, and I help management teams better communicate and better collaborate together. So everyone wants to talk. That's kind of in what I do, that's the beautiful thing that I find. People want to talk, they want to collaborate, but we're afraid to hurt people's feelings. We're afraid to say the wrong thing. Sometimes we're afraid to be vulnerable with our teams. Say, I don't know, say, I need help. Say I made a mistake, say I'm sorry even. And it's just about being a little bit more human. And when we create that space where we have that permission with one another, then it's like we've seen the other side of the world, and we don't want to go back.
It's solving a different problem, though. When you're solving a programming problem or technical problem, that's a different kind of problem you're solving. When you're solving a human side of things, these are different problems. These are emotional problems. These are behavior problems. Totally different problems.
Completely. I completely agree. And and it's hard having this conversation where you're trying to talk with a colleague and saying, you live a little bit too much in your head, buddy. Do you notice your impact on your team? One of my favorite questions for leaders, and I ask this in a lot of my programs, is I'll tend to ask leaders, what does your leadership create? Does your leadership create compliance, or does it create engagement? So when we talk about compliance,
Yeah.
we'll say following the rules, doing my job, and that's enough. But you can be compliant and doing your job, but be very engaged as an
Yeah.
employee. I look at compliance, there's a healthy side, which is what I just described, and then there's the unhealthy side, which is around saying, I'm doing this because I'm afraid of the consequences of not doing it.
Yeah.
And when that's what your leadership creates, there's a challenge there. There's an opportunity for you to grow as a leader. But sometimes it's not that you're doing it on purpose, it's the culture of the company that you're in. And you
Yeah.
may never have done anything wrong to anyone, but it's the culture of the company that you're in, and people are afraid of consequences. So it's kind of, you have to be mindful of when you say something, are you tapping into what the culture is and creating something without even realizing it?
Uh, I know I heard a lot of younger people as well, Stefan. I want to ask you this: that generation, our generation or generation before that, were they different when it comes to leadership development compared to the students coming out of university fresh now? Their expectations are different, right? They want to see the purpose. They want to see more of leadership by example than by compliance, I guess, right? So. Are they expecting different from a leadership that our generation or generation before expected?
So what I find with the younger generation now in the workplace, one of the big differences is like you said, they need to do work that has meaning, and they need to know why they're doing something, and they need to be able to contribute. That's what they want, a sense of contribution. So, as a leader, it's about how can you leverage what they can bring, and how can you help them grow. But not all leaders think that way or understand how to do that. And that's part of the challenge that we see in the workplace. There's, for sure, I'm going to be careful not to say anything controversial, but for sure, the expectations and the way of seeing work is different. And there is a bridge to gap between the two generations. I'm going to say it like that. At the same time, we both want to get stuff done. It's just about the how. And it's about how can we involve these people that want to be involved? And how can we help them grow and mold them in a healthy way inside our organization?
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah, and I think that's the expectation they come to, almost show me. What I find is the younger people I hire is that it's don't tell me, just show me what needs to be done. So they want example. They're hungry for purpose, as you mentioned. The great point.
So just to challenge you a little bit on that, one thing I see though is that sometimes the challenge is they're not used to working for things in the same way. For some people, not everyone. So, I remember when I had some interns a while back, what I used to do is when the interns came to see me and they would ask me a question, if I would go back to their desk, start looking at the problem a bit, and I could figure out the solution in a minute or less, I would get up and I would go back to my desk. And I would not tell them the answer. And then they would look at me and they'd go, but what are you doing? Go, no, if I could find it in a minute,
you can
find it.
Yeah.
And I'd go back to my desk and I'd go see them half an hour after. And I'd say, how are you doing? How is it moving for you? Did you find your solution? And if they said no, then I'd say, okay, but you should have by now. So show me, how are you doing this? How are you debugging this problem? Show me, I'm going to watch you and I'm going to help you.
So are you looking for the thought process, how they think it through the solution, or are you looking for the approach to this thing? This is how I'm going to approach it.
A little bit of both. In those days, I would be tracing through code, for example. Okay, so did you set any watches anywhere?
Yeah.
No. So how do you know what this variable is?
Yeah.
And by the middle of their internship with me, they'd come see me and I'd tell them, is this a 1 minute thing again? And they'd go, no. And I'd go see. And if it was, and I'd go back, they'd be mad.
Yeah.
They'd be upset because they'd go, I didn't figure it out. And I should have. And by the end, they knew how to search. They knew how to think. They knew how to look for themselves. They knew how to fish.
Yeah. That's one thing I learned by recruiting a lot of people for a company for over the years, Stefan, is I care a little bit. I pay less attention to their technical skills, but I pay more attention to their thought process, their approach to the problems. Because if they have a right approach to the problem, their thought process is clear, they're logical, they will find a solution, whatever the problem is. But if that's not clear, that's very hard to fix. So you simply got to decide how much work is going to need to, to help them to get to the right thought process compared to they having a technical skills.
And then you have to look at the potential. I know for my interns, I didn't worry about potential. It was my role as being responsible for their internship. It was my role to push them. It was my role to help them feel they were doing valuable work and that they were learning and growing. But for employees, when I work with companies, with my clients, often what I'll do is I'll look, and there's people that I'll spend more time with because they're the high potential people. No one is specifically asking me to spend time with them, but I can see the leadership potential in these people, and I'll invest some of my time as part of my mandate to help them along and to make sure that they grow, to help them see their blind spots, to do a lot of the things you were talking about earlier.
Yeah. Very interesting. Wow, there's so much to learn from your wisdom. There's so much, I just learned so much from our discussion, Stefan.
Fun.
Yeah, no, I think the business leader we're watching, you're gonna draw a lot of value from it. I'll encourage everybody to reach out to you for conversation. I learn a lot, but everybody reaches out. Just sometimes just a conversation can give you a totally different perspective, right? So that's how we learn and that's how we grow. And definitely, I recommend everybody to just reach out for a conversation with you. Where can people find you? How can they connect with you, Stefan?
So people can find me on LinkedIn. I assume that my name is going to be on the podcast.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to include links to your website and your LinkedIn page below the video as well.
Okay. So on LinkedIn, it's Steffan Surdek.
Yep.
Steffan Surdek. My company website is called surdek.com, surdek.com. If you want to have some great information, go lose yourself in our blog. We have tons and tons of leadership content. And if you go in our resources section of the website, you'll find a couple of our leadership development resources that you're surely going to find interesting and very rich as well.
Well, there's a great video series I saw on your website as well. People can sign up and they can start receiving those videos. I think those are great resource to learn from, just from videos and instead of, just trying to dig yourself, different medias.
That video series is around difficult conversations. And what I do is at a high level, I teach some of the principles I teach my clients around difficult conversations. We go further in one of our programs, but this gives you a high level overview of the steps that you can use to have difficult conversations. Another interesting document on the website is a resource called Around Your Leadership Journey.
Yeah.
And that's the basics that I teach of personal development to leaders. What I talked about earlier, what does your leadership create? Noticing your impact, all of those things. We talk about that. It's a 40-page PDF, but it's definitely worth it. And if I can share one more thing.
Sure, go for it.
Coming soon to a theater.
Yeah, I was about to mention that. Yeah, you got a book coming up.
I received the first copy last week.
Nice.
This is kind of my final proof, but this is going to be available sometime this summer, September for sure. So this should be available on Amazon and other online stores. And it's called The Way of the Co-Creative Leader. And it talks about something that I talk about, my thing, called co-creative leadership. And throughout our discussion tonight, I sprinkled some co-creative leadership help without naming it.
Yeah, I'll look forward to the book as well. I think there's going to be a lot great insights in the book. People can learn from it. And you do a lot of leadership training as well, Stefan, coaching, consulting, training.
Yes. So I work with management teams using the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni as kind of the background theme to work through. So in those workshops, we help leadership teams get closer together, and we help them learn better ways of collaborating together. And what I find fascinating in those workshops, it's a series of 6 workshops, 6 half days, like I said earlier. What I find cool is after workshop number 2, people are already starting to see little things shift, and they get concrete tools that they can use after the fact. And I also offer some executive coaching around co-creative leadership. So leaders that are looking to grow, that are looking to have a different perspective on leadership, what I do in that program, it's a 1-year program that you can work one-on-one with me. And what I do in that program is we talk a little bit about co-creative leadership up front. And after that, what we do is in our regular meetings together, we talk about your current business problems that you have, and we talk about how does a co-creative leader handle that. So it's applied learning, it's applied knowledge, and you always have something that you can go and play with by the end of our calls.
Very interesting. Definitely encourage business leaders to. I'm looking forward to the book, by the way. But I'll encourage business leaders to reach out to you for conversation. There's so much wisdom, so much lessons to draw from your wisdom. So I learned so much. Definitely I'm going to include a link below the video. Everybody should check out your blog for sure, resources on your website, and have a conversation with you.
Thank you so much, by the way, Gurmeet. I know I appreciate you reached out to me for this podcast, and really, it's been a lot of fun. I did not see the time go by in our conversation, and I have a feeling we could talk for another hour if we wanted.
Yeah, when the book comes out, we can have another conversation, definitely about the book. But yeah, no, I enjoy our discussion. Thank you so much for spending time with me. It was great discussion. Enjoyed it. I'm sure people are going to draw tons of value from our discussion.
Thank you very much. And thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this
Thank
session.